Hey everyone, we're back with Lights, Camera, and Action with Miranda and Chris. If you watched our first episode of us being back, which was our last episode, you would have met Miranda virtually, learned all about her, where she came from, her backgrounds, her experiences, and her goals with this podcast. We're really excited for this episode. We're going to talk about red flags and what to watch out for when picking an agency, selecting your photographers, showing up for photo shoots, and in general, just staying safe out there shooting. So, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and reintroduce Miranda.
Hey everyone. Nice to virtually see all of you again.
And so we're back. We're going to talk, like I said, about some red flags, and I'm going to start off by just saying that everything that we're going to mention and talk about in this episode today is really good evidence and really good reason on why you might want to partner with a modeling agency or a trusted photographer, a trusted source, and really get well integrated and really just get to know other models, other photographers, and other businesses in your region. So, um, just being able to create those valuable relationships are going to help you keep you safe, but also help you learn and avoid some really tragic scenarios and some things that we've personally seen and that you'll hear about in today's episode. So, we're going to start off with talking about picking an agency and red flags to watch out for. Miranda, if you want to go ahead and just take us off with the first couple of points, and then we'll dive into them deeper.
Yeah. So essentially, when it comes to picking a modeling agency, it's a lot more than just Googling modeling agencies near me or modeling agencies near any big city, because anybody can optimize well for a search engine, stand up a cool website, whatever. What you really need to look for is like someone whose models are booking work. Maybe they have an Instagram profile and they're constantly hyping up their models. You see if their models are working models and they have a strong portfolio. And when you go to apply, it doesn't say something like application fee. And it doesn't say something like, oh, to come in and get your headshots done. Because, as a model, you should probably already have a cop card and headshots and a portfolio. Even if you're just getting started, it's good to already have those things on your own, and they might help you book other shoots, but you don't need to pay them for that. If you start seeing things like that, if you start seeing that you want to apply for an agency who, they claim they're going to advocate for you, help you book work, but then they're asking you for money, that is a major red flag. And a lot of people call this pay to play method. And if something's pay to play, like it's too good to be true a lot of the time. And a lot of the time, what these people are doing is maybe, they have one or two models that book a lot of work or that they claim book a lot of work, but then they're really just like getting money from a lot of other people who are probably, perhaps younger, more inexperienced in the industry, who are willing to pay because they think, oh, if I give them money, I'm going to get a shot at something big here. And sadly, that's just usually not how that works out. Pay to play is usually a big red flag. I usually say avoid any type of like money exchange on the first consult with an agent. Like if you're just now applying and it's asking you for credit card information, that is potentially a very dangerous scam. Suffice it to say, just to be frank, that's a huge thing though. The pay to play stuff is really can get really sketchy really fast, and sometimes they're sneaky about it. So you have to be really like, on the lookout. Like, okay, are they going to ask me for money here and there? And then maybe they're going to ask you for $1,000 suddenly. And you're like, oh no, and you've already signed something. So you have to be super careful about that. That's a
Yeah.
big one.
I'm really glad you touched on this topic because it's something I see a lot. And you especially see this not as much with brick and mortar locations or like real people that you meet up with virtually. That this happens a lot with website companies that are just solely based online. And if you never physically talk to a rep, you never really pick up the phone, they don't have a conversation with you, they don't screen you, they don't ask you really important questions, ask you about your goals and your ambitions and the things you want to do, the things you don't want to do. It's a good indication that they're not really in it for you. Pay to play, as you put it, that's a great term, is something that's very much frowned upon in modeling agency world. if you ask any real agency if you should pay an agent upfront fees, they're going to tell you no, because they're actually in a lot of cases doing is they're just taking your money that you've spent to be listed on their website, and they're using that just to pay like their hosting fee for their website, or they're using that for like advertising, right? So they take the money you have and then they build like an ad campaign, and they're not necessarily guaranteed that that ad campaign is going to be used for you, but what it's going to be used for is their company. And so what happens is they get lots and lots and lots of people who apply because they're online. It's really easy to access. They accept everyone, and they get, get lucky, and they do eventually have enough people to who do land roles because businesses catch note because they have such a large directory. So what ends up happening is they're saying, "Hey, we've got these five actors who booked a movie gig, or we've got these five models who worked with this runway project," but it's always just those few models, or they've just got so many people doing it that they just have a large directory to choose from, and that doesn't guarantee you anything. And something that any agent will tell you is there is no real guarantee unless they themselves are the project. For example, like SDS Modeling Co, we're in charge of our own publications. We edit them, we produce them, we sell them all ourselves. I have complete control of whoever is featured and not featured in the publication. But if you're talking about an agent, somebody who's just marketing you to other companies, they don't have absolute control that you're actually going to get selected. So what they're just saying is pay us a little bit of money up front so you can have your picture on our website. And so working with SDS Modeling Co, for example, is free. We don't charge for any of our services, and if you want to do a photo shoot, it's free. You just got to tell us like, hey, I need experience in this, and we'll help you. And that really should be your agency's job, is to help you not only get introduced to companies and brands and to businesses and photographers, but ultimately they should also have a goal set of helping you grow and develop and learn and gain confidence and experience and those sorts of things. They should not be charging you to gain those things. They shouldn't be charging you to build your portfolio, because ultimately it's in their best interest for you to have the best portfolio.
100%. Yeah, I agree with that. And it actually leads into another good point, which is the value of having a good agent, like a legitimate agent, like I have here with Chris. I'm a lucky gal. Is, you have someone who is on your side, they're on your team, they're in your corner, and they're working to develop you as a model. It's a true professional partnership. And that's what you always need to look for, like that true professional partnership in business, because modeling is a business. And you, as a model, like you are selling your image and your ideas and your artistic expression. So, to have someone treat you as anything less than like a business partner is really problematic. So, yeah, it's so good to have a good agent, specifically when we get into another red flag that occurs when you're starting to book modeling gigs. So maybe you've got an agent, maybe you have a good agent and you book a shoot, maybe, on your own, or maybe your agent books a shoot and they don't know like the project super well, but they got you on the project, you're really excited. But you get there on set and maybe you notice some red flags there. So there are things to look out for. I say too, when you get on set, a huge one is if you didn't get a good description of what the shoot is going to be beforehand and you walk into a situation that you're not comfortable with, call your agent like immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Let them know you're not comfortable with what's going on. I've had friends in the past who would show up for a shoot and the photographer might seem like a solid person, but they wouldn't really show their portfolio, or they wouldn't really, share any information about their work. And you show up and then it's like they ask you to do something really, weird or crazy that you're not comfortable with. And that's a situation you want to be able to like get out of ASAP because that's a huge red flag. Right. And then we were actually talking about this before. And Chris, you had a good point too about people just like bringing people along onto shoots that I thought was interesting, like another red flag there.
I'm really glad that you touched on this point, because it's something that, showing up to a set it's got multiple points that really need to be touched on. But I'm kind of backtrack a little bit on some of the points you made, and saying that like an agent, also like a really good one, is going to work really hard to make sure that they've got all the details if they're the one who's setting up the shoot, right? to have who's showing up, what you're doing on the shoot, make sure that they're not crossing any lines, things that you're not comfortable with, or things that you don't want to do. And but if something, say you show up to a shoot and the photographer is like, "Hey, I need you to put on this outfit," or "Hey, I need you to do this specific pose," or even if they like bring somebody along, like another photographer or chaperone or somebody who you didn't know was going to be there, if you call your agent, if they're really a partner or somebody who really cares about, your well-being, they're going to pull you off the shoot and tell you like to stop, that your agent's pulling you off the shoot and that you're not to shoot anymore. Right. But an agent who doesn't really care for you, or some of those like pay to play online agencies, they're not always somebody like a rep who's there. They're just sending you the booking info. They're a glorified booking site. And so you run into really big issues with these red flags, which is why we're talking about them, where you can go onto set and little things can happen and like little things can change. And the next thing you know, and you're in a real bad situation. So, as you were saying, sometimes models can show up on set and photographers or even sometimes businesses will actually bring another photographer or bring another person who was on set that you weren't aware of. And these are really big red flags because these could lead to potentially, and not always something that's violent or a dangerous situation, but could just lead to something maybe you're not comfortable with. And just to give a real world example, I know a model who showed up on set and she agreed to do this shoot. She didn't book it through me, right? She booked it on herself, which as a model, this is another scenario where, work with your agent to book them because they really care about you. They're going to work with you to get the book set up, get everything set up so they know everything's safe. But she didn't, she didn't book it through an agent. She didn't book it through me. She worked directly with the photographer. She thought she felt safe with the photographer. She showed up on set. Well, the photographer invited another photographer who she didn't know or didn't know was going to be there. This photographer, while they were shooting, was supposed to be taking candid photos. You're not paying attention, so they kind of look like they're work in progress photos or behind the scenes or things like that. Well, she never actually saw any of the photos that the other photographers took and never received any further communication from the other photographer. So while there may not have been anything inherently dangerous or bad on the other photographer's work, it could have. And if you were, for example, say you're somebody who's comfortable with doing like implied or nude art shoots, and then they bring somebody else on set that you're not, like, you don't know or you weren't prepared to be there, it is okay to stand up for yourself and say, I'm not comfortable with this, because you just don't know like the next thing that they might change or the next thing they might add. And it could just spiral out before like Miranda was saying with the pay to play stuff, next thing you know, you've already signed up for something you didn't necessarily agree to. And so that's, one really benefit of working with, an agent is you can call them up and say, whether it's us or whether it's somebody else you trust, you could just say, hey, I didn't sign up for this. And so, red flags are really important, not only in choosing your right agent, but also just paying attention when you pull up on a set and watching for minor things to change.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is a really good example of how things, like you said, might not inherently seem dangerous at first or might seem innocent, but definitely have some sketch implications, and that's like what a red flag is. The nature of a red flag is sort of like, maybe it's not even super obvious at first, but it pops up and then you're like, oh, right. Mm-hmm. And it's good to be aware of these things. Like all these things we're talking about are things you need to take into consideration. And I always say, like, trust your gut, like as a model and like a working professional. And just as a human being, like, when something feels off. I've even had friends who were in the situation, some of my other friends who model, where they've shown up on set and it was just like a hostile work environment. Sometimes, like, the other models will bully each other, or maybe someone in wardrobe spoke to them in a way they really didn't, appreciate. And that's another good reason to have an agent in your corner, because you can call your agent. It's like having, like, they're like everything all in one. They're like your business partner, but they're also like your friend. They care about you. They're like your HR person, in these sets, basically, because you can call your agent and say, like, I think this is a hostile working environment right now. Or like, this person spoke to me this way and it was unprofessional. I didn't appreciate it. Maybe as a woman, like, I know I've like been in situations before where maybe like there's a guy in wardrobe and they comment on my body in a way like I don't appreciate, right? Like you can always call your agent in those situations. And a lot of the time, like your agent will have those people pulled off the shoot. And if they won't pull those people off, then like they'll just say, well, my model's not doing it, which is great because they're advocating for you and empowering you as a model. Because yeah, I've certainly seen that happen on professional sets where someone steps out of line. A lot of times it's just like working at a corporation, like a business, like maybe you're afraid to say something, but if something feels off, if someone says something to you that's like nasty and hurtful, or just, you know, a kind of like a gross thing to say that strikes you as creepy or weird, like always speak up, you know, especially if you have an agent. If you don't have an agent, maybe talk to, you know, the set director, just whoever's in charge on the set, but always say something. It's kind of like, it's so cliche, but if you see something, say something. And one of the biggest red flags that I think in modeling and in the fashion industry that just goes kind of not talked about is just the way people treat each other sometimes on set. Like, this is work, this is a business, this is professional, and if anyone, you know, on set is serious about it, then they should treat it that way. You know, you couldn't walk into work and just verbally, you know, yell at your coworker for no reason, right? So it shouldn't be that way on a set. We should always respect each other.
And that's a really good point, and I'm glad you brought it up. And it brings and it highlights something that I don't think gets talked about a lot, and that's red flags don't always come from a photographer, and they don't always come from a business, but they can also come from your coworkers. They can come from other models, right? And so red flags can come from really anywhere. And so, Miranda has a unique perspective as a model, witnessing like, hey, things can kind of go sour. But from a business perspective, I can also point out a few things too, as far as like red flags. If we were to backtrack a little bit, when picking out an agency, we talked a little bit about the pay to play. That's really from a model perspective, saying like, hey, like you shouldn't be paying for anything that, should be free. Like that's just good sense anyways. But also, when you're picking out an agency or working with a photographer, and they request you to take photos or submit photos that aren't a part of any specific project that you agree to, that's a red flag, right? So, no modeling agency out there, unless it's adult entertainment only, should request nude photos. So if you're working with an agency and they're like, you need to send us nude photos, that's a red flag immediately. So some people are comfortable with submitting those sorts of photos, but it should never be an expectation. And the same for a photographer. Like if a photographer has access to your portfolio online, whether through your book, like your booking agency, whether it's through your portfolio online, whether it's through your Instagram, it may make sense to say like, hey, do you have I'm doing a swimsuit magazine. We want to include you. Do you have examples of you doing a swimsuit shoot? Right. That's a photo that makes sense because it's directly related to a project you were discussing. But it doesn't make sense if you're like, hey, let's do a fashion thing in this gown. And they're like, we need to see you in lingerie, or we need to see you nude, or we need to see you in swimsuit. That's a red flag because there's no reason they need to see that. Now, they could request measurements, right? That's fair, but never to ask for or require you to in any way subject yourself to something you wouldn't normally do.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like as a woman and a model, especially when you get into what we're going to talk about next week, for one, like marketing yourself as a model, you start getting a lot more requests. And a big part of like, identifying red flags and fielding those, I mean, it's kind of the whole thing, right? It's like knowing when a request is legitimate and when it's like related to a project that you've booked through your agent, or like a legitimate project that you're on, you're like getting a callback for, or that you're getting like to go on a go see for. Those are like actual things that make sense in the context. Like you said, if it's a swimsuit shot and they want like a bikini photo that's like from your portfolio, like that makes sense. It's a swimsuit shoot, right? But as a woman too, like me just knowing that my intuition sometimes tells me like, oh, this random photographer just Instagram DM'd me and wants to see a picture of me very specifically wearing like this skimpy swimsuit, and they don't have a project proposed or anything. I'm like, that's just them being a little weird, probably. Like just having, like you said, a lot of it's good sense, but I think a lot of it's like gut feeling. So when you start marketing yourself as a model online, which we're going to dive into more next week too, you're going to start getting more requests maybe from photographers or kind of out of left field. And then just once again, the value of having a good agent, because then you can say, oh, for my booking information, you know, this is my agent, and give them your agency's email. And like, you know, that protects you there too. You don't have to feel like you're alone in fielding these situations that might be like a little confusing or even a little uncomfortable sometimes.
Well, and I've got a really good example of this. I had a model who had a photographer who she didn't know. He kind of like in, you don't like judging people and you don't like saying negative things about people you don't know, but she had a weird feeling about the request. And so she gave them like, hey, you can book me through my manager. Here's the link you can book me through. Well, they inevitably they did. They submitted a link through the website to book them. And when I reached out, I was like, hey, she's really interested, in doing cool projects. What's the project? Well, the photographer's like, I'm looking for specifically somebody to do a topless photo shoot, and I want your model to do this topless photo shoot. Now, I don't want to get into the the nitty gritty discussion of, nudity and art and photography, but some people are comfortable with that and some people aren't, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. Now, if you're not, your agent will back you up if they're good, right? They're not going to subject you or submit you to projects you don't want to do. So in this case, I already knew the model was not going to do. She was not interested in that sort of work. Well, when I told them that, they kind of got upset. The photographer was upset that the model didn't want to do their nude photo shoot and kept trying to provide incentives. Oh, well, we'll pay him double, or we'll put him in all these extra magazines, and just tried to keep going on and on. But for me as a business, right, I have the authority to say no, this is the final solution. But if you're an individual model, it may be a little bit more difficult to say no to like somebody saying we'll pay you double. Right. So there's a lot of persuasion techniques that are red flags that are easier to navigate when you have somebody navigating that for you or dealing with that for you versus, somebody who can maybe talk you into something that you maybe weren't comfortable with, but they tried to make you feel comfortable with through like money or other things. And that's also something that, from a business perspective, right, is your agent will have connections to things that and authority that you might not have as a model. Now, if you're really well known, you've got a great name, and you've been doing projects, lots and lots and lots of projects, and you've got like lots of businesses on your side, this may not always be the case. But for the majority, especially those starting out, your agent has connections and authorities that you don't have, right? So we have the ability to call up, an attorney. We have the ability to call up, some sort of authority figure or a business head or whoever, and to say like this is unacceptable, right? Whereas a model, it may be a little bit more effort, a little bit more work when you're in to obtain those kinds of like services, just because you're an individual. And so your agent should also have connections. They're not just a website booking site for you.
Yeah, totally. And I think really like what we're getting into a lot with this, with red flags, is like just use, good sense, your own gut feeling and judgment. And if you are a model, look into getting an agent. I really recommend getting a good agent that really cares about you, because like Chris just said, so many of these things can really be mediated or just like even like fielded better in like a more professional way if you have like a professional partnership with an agent who's on your side. Because yeah, they honestly a lot of the time do have connections that it's harder to build as an individual, and then you can actually focus on the modeling and they can focus on like the stuff like the booking work and like the fielding these situations, and you always have someone like in your corner on your team backing you up. So just know, like, if something feels wrong, if something feels off, if someone's asking you for a lot of money, or any type of really personal information that is kind of irrelevant, like obviously like don't put in your credit card information on a lot of these sites, right? Or like don't give like your social to anybody. But even less obviously, like if the photo that a photographer is asking for seems a little weird and it's not really connected to a specific project, like you don't have to do that. Like you can say no, especially if you have an agent that you could raise the question to and say, what do you think, and they can give you advice. So it's a lot of just trusting your gut, knowing what feels wrong, and like learning how to advocate for yourself, and then find a good agent that will advocate for you to keep things professional and keep you out of these like red flag situations before they really occur. because the red flag is what's going to pop up first. And like, hopefully you can learn to recognize those and your agent will recognize those and it keeps you out of the situation before it happens. That's the ideal
Yep.
scenario.
You're exactly right. And I think with all those red flags, and you highlighted them very quickly, the pay to play, your common sense of don't supply anything that feels uncomfortable or something that you wouldn't normally give out. And then I think one final thing I want to touch on for shoots is when photographers ask you, well, two final things I want to talk about. But the first one of the final things is when a photographer asks you to do a specific like pose that you're also not comfortable with. You know, you want to feel beautiful. Sometimes you want to feel sexy. Sometimes you want to feel, you know, like powerful and strong. But also, you should never also feel like you have to demoralize yourself to do those things. So anytime, or just do something that you're not comfortable with, even if it's not necessarily demoralizing. Your photographer should also like be talking about those things and helping you through those things as well. So if they're not, that's another red flag to say, hey, maybe this isn't what I think it is. And so I think that, those are some really good red flags. And then the final thing I want to talk about from a business perspective and from an agent perspective, though, is we talked about a lot of red flags. And it's really good to have your senses and your wit, but also not everything is a red flag. So just some upfront things you should expect when picking a photographer, when working with agents, is that yes, you should never pay upfront. You're an agent, right? You shouldn't be paying fees for headshots and portfolios unless it's some like special event with a famous photographer who, they got you a really good discount or something like that. But most scenarios aren't something like that, right? They're just saying, hey, pay us money up front and we'll give you a couple of headshots, which a good agent doesn't do that. But there are fees. Occasionally there are fees working with your agent, right? So your agent still has to make money to keep the business running, right? So do expect that when you get a paid shoot, they might take a cut, right? Or if there's a finder's fee, they may ask you for a finder's fee. If they introduced you to a photographer and the photographer pays you, it may be fair for your agent to request a finder's fee or to request a booking fee. Now, a booking fee in the sense of like if a fashion team booked you for a 3-day shoot in Florida, right? And they paid you $1,500, right? Your agent may say, I need 10% of that or 20% of that. So, there are fees associated with working with agents, but they shouldn't be something that result in you paying to get the job, right? They should always be as like the agent's rewarded when you're rewarded. And that's our motto here. We're rewarded like when you get something good that's great, then same with us. And when we get something that's good and great, you get something that's good and great, right? So your agent should also be positioning you into a position where like even if you're doing like time for print, like they should still be putting you in situations where you feel like you gained value from that.
Yeah, exactly. I think you put it exactly in like the right context because yeah, most agents, really any agent that's professional, that yeah, they have to make money. And so typically, yeah, you're going to see like the finder's fee, the booking fee, or like taking a cut of your work is most common in my experience. Like if you get paid and your agent, facilitated that shoot, or you have a contractual obligation with your agent, yeah, they're entitled to a part of your payment. And that's really how that works. So it's really like never pay up front because exactly the agent wants to work to get you work because then they also benefit from that. So it's supposed to be like a mutually beneficial relationship. And so if you're just paying them money and you get nothing out of it, you're kind of just getting ripped off. You know what I mean? Whereas in a good business partnership with a good agent, you're booking work and making money, and then they're making money through booking you that work. And it's like this awesome mutually beneficial thing that like you're building this career together, and then you advocate for each other harder. Like you're going to work harder for this agent because they booked work and like you're out here killing it as a model, and then they're going to work harder for you because you're showing up to shoots, you're being professional and prompt, you're helping them be successful as a business. So yeah, it should always be like a mutually beneficial relationship for
And
sure.
and that touches on a point because you keep using this word, which I love. As a business owner, as a photographer, as a community member, is partnership. It's a partnership, and that also implies too that like if your agency does require you to pay a fee, that doesn't mean you should also like try to hide and be sketchy about the projects you're doing, right? Or try to avoid payment because Your agent has worked really hard to like help you with your reputation. They've worked really hard to keep their reputation clean. They've, helped you with booking fees. So if you've gained something through your agent, they really do deserve that. And I know I'm speaking as the business owner myself, but they really do deserve to have the utmost respect, because ultimately they're also going to help you. They're going to want to work harder, and if they feel like they can trust you, they'll trust you with more projects. And that's something that's really beneficial. It's a partnership, and if you don't want to pay your agent the money that they rightfully earned, then maybe you should also just not have an agent. But you also lose out with all the benefits of having an agent. So while you shouldn't pay up front, there are fees, but they're worth it and they're good fees, right? Same thing with photographers. Now, we talked about red flags, but not everything is a red flag. Sometimes photographers just forget stuff. Like, I'm a real forgetful person, right? I may forget, oh, I did tell somebody who was chaperoning me they could come learn for a session. Right. So just because somebody did show up on a set doesn't mean immediately it's a bad thing. That's why we talked about speaking up and using your wits, right? Hey, who is this photographer? Why are they here? And call your agent either way, right? And then your agent will figure it out and just be like, you need to remove the person next time, tell us in advance, right? But and then if you're doing something, your photographer oftentimes are just behind the lens, right? They're not always looking at you in the way that you look at yourself as a model, right? They're looking at you as either a project, work they have, like work, like I've got to get this done. I've got to get this done in a certain amount of time. Just like when you go to work and you're like, I got to write this, or you're a student, you got to write a paper and you got to get it done by midnight. Photographers often work the same way. And so they're trying to get the best result as quickly as they can. So they may make suggestions, right? So they may say, hey, try this. And in their mind, they're thinking about the end result, but they're not necessarily always thinking about you as the model, which is a really hard mindset to get into in work. And so, again, use your voice, speak up, or use your agent. Say, hey, they're calling, they're asking me to do this thing. Now, definitely speak up, always speak your mind, because honesty is the best policy, but also be aware that sometimes, not everything is necessarily inherently wrong or a red flag, but you should always know, and you will know in most scenarios when it was just something like accidental or something didn't happen, right? And you'll know that by the demeanor of the person, and whether or not your agent helped you set it up. And sometimes agents mess up; they book photo shoots with the wrong photographer, but good agents will have your back. And I think that's one of the biggest things is, we'll have your back.
Yep, 100%. Chris has my back, so have a good agent, people. This is like the the big takeaway here, I feel like. But no, like generally, yeah, like Chris said, trust your gut. Have an agent you can lean on, a partnership in place, because it really helps if you're a working model, if you're aspiring to be a working model. That is the key foundation, other than to just like having your portfolio started, is have an agent, just like have a partnership in this, because going it alone can be really difficult, really crazy, and sometimes, frankly, it can get a little unsafe. And so just always be on the lookout for this stuff.
All right, guys, you heard it here. Partnership is the key. We appreciate y'all tuning in. I know we did a lot of like kind of back and forth talking about red flags, but really, like we saw, talkways, partnership, making sure that you pay attention to things that put you in a position you feel uncomfortable in, and don't just do it because you feel like you have to. So we appreciate you tuning in to this podcast, vlog, video, depending on however you're consuming it. You can find us on any platform, whether it's Google, whether it's Instagram, whether it's YouTube, whether it's Facebook, whether it's, I think we have Pinterest. I'm pretty sure we have a Pinterest too. Just at SDS Modeling Co. You'll find us immediately, and you'll find this video. We're redoing our Apple stream thing, so we'll be back up on Apple Podcast soon. You'll find us on Spotify. Ultimately, though, you'll want to see the video so you can see it when Miranda's laughing at me, and you can see that on Instagram, IGTV. You can see it on YouTube. Maybe if you're lucky, I'll do some clips and you'll see it in your reels. So that's how you find us. Miranda, tell us all about the panda, how they can find you.
You can find me on Instagram. I'm at FurPanda, at FIR Panda, because nothing else rhymes with Miranda. So that's me. That's my only official Instagram account. All the others are fake. So that's it, just at FurPanda. You can also check out my website, mirandamuses.com. And yes, to catch more of mine and Chris's content together that we've worked on already, that we're working on in the future, because we have exciting stuff coming up, go to SDS Modeling Co. Like you said, Instagram, Facebook, just wherever you search, we'll be there. So yeah, good to see everyone again and excited for next time.
And well, and if Lord willing, and the creeks don't rise, we'll see you in a couple of weeks when we record our next one. Do you have that up? What we're recording next?
Yes, because I'm really excited about the next one. It's marketing yourself as a model, which is huge these days because social media has really opened that space up. So, a lot of cool stuff to talk about with marketing yourself as a model and how you present yourself online in this day and age.
And you'll want to tune in for that because, as a business and a marketing person, I'll have some unique insights on you for that as well. Again, at Fur Panda, at SDS Modeling Co. This has been Lights, Camera, Action with Chris, your host, and your co host, Miranda. Peace. So I've got the jitters today.
You got
I grabbed this because I was like, maybe it'll help me calm down, but I don't know that it did
that. Story of my life.
Now, some people, well, and I almost lost my camera there. Some people, a little blooper moment there. Sorry, I got the jitters today, but so y'all can't see Miranda, but she's laughing at me.